think you're missing a big story here, Connor. I think, you've focused on the big one. You've gone straight in with Plymouth. But there's an important one that I think you in particular might want to talk about.
Cutting edge insight here on the Sportsman Untitled.
Cheers, Gav. Good work.
I'm here for you, mate.
Which of those players gets in Leeds' team? Of all the signings that have been made by United, by Burnley, by Sunderland, which of those players actually starts a game for Leeds this season?
He'd rather work for somebody like him than maybe work for the Venkies. Maybe there's an aspect of that in there as well.
Hello everybody, welcome back to The Sportsman with a very unfamiliar host. Our host is actually on vacation in Mexico. Shout out to you, Simon. I hope you're having a lovely time. This week, myself, Conor McGilligan, normally your Leeds United expert, is joined by REFL expert as always, Gab Sutton. And for this week, and hopefully not this week only, we are joined as well by Oli Mann of the Sheffield United way. Massive weekend in the EFL, huge weekend in the FA Cup as well. The two big stories from the weekend, of course, Plymouth Argyle knocking Liverpool out, giant killing. But also, another big story of this weekend as well, Paul Warne has been relieved of his duty as well.
I think you're missing a big story here, Connor. I think, you've focused on the big one, you've gone straight in with Plymouth. But there's an important one that I think you in particular might want to talk about. Millwall have done you. They've knocked you out of the cup. What went wrong? What was happening there? What did you do wrong? Because I think you want to talk about these big stories, you're deflecting. Tell me about Leeds.
So as you can say, I stumbled a little bit there when I was talking about Paul Warne because I knew he was coming for me there. We had the two big stories. This is obviously the big story, isn't it? Yeah, look, 10 changes, Ollie, and I know you're going to interject here as well and talk about this, but listen, 10 big changes for Leeds United. But Millwall deserved it. Millwall thoroughly deserved it.
I want to ask you this. Sorry, I was just going to ask you this from a Leeds perspective, Connor. What does the performance against Millwall tell you about the squad depth for Leeds and what the position that they'll be in, if you do have injuries in the last third of the campaign, and which players can you rely on and which players can't you, maybe?
I think, obviously, notoriously in a matchday squad, you have your 15, 16, don't you? So our rotation normally has been Joseph, Ramazani, Nonto, Andor, Rothwell, Strauch, etc. I think that rotation as a four is pretty decent going into the latter part of the championship. However, I think it's pretty abundantly clear that when you make 10 changes, even with quality, it's that unit, isn't it? It's the partnerships. It's, Chambers came in on the right-hand side, a young 17-year-old lad, and it just felt like it was completely disjointed. I think Millwall made 5 changes. And you could just see they looked a lot more accomplished. Fully deserved it on the day, I thought. And they're looking good at the minute, aren't they, Millwall? They're looking really, really good. But yeah, let's really quickly move on from that. But yes, we are more than happy to focus on the league. I spoke about it a little bit earlier on before I was rudely interrupted. Paul Warne, relieved of his duties. I don't know. Obviously, Derby promotion, unbelievable. They'll always remember that with Warne, and it's a very, very good moment in their recent history. Struggled though, didn't he? Was really struggling with Derby County. Gab, it feels like it was inevitable at some point that this was going to happen. So,
sure. I think the owner, David Klaus, clearly has a lot of respect for Paul Warne, and I don't think you can be in football and not have a lot of respect for him on a personal level. I think... obviously a difficult gig because Derby came into the season with clearly a bottom 6 championship squad, and if you put some of the injuries that they'd had in the last third of the season into that, it's probably a bottom 3 squad. So I do have some sympathy from him from that point of view. But I also think I look at coaches who are able to really make the pound stretch further at championship level. I don't think Paul Warne's record really at this level quite as means that he's shown to do that. Doesn't mean that he's done horrendously at this level. It just means he's not quite been able to maximise his resources in the same way that other managers might be able to. And one of them being possibly John Eustace, who Derby County are heavily linked with.
Yeah, and we've got Gab's Corner of Concern coming up very soon, everybody, of which we will delve into that. But a few bits at the weekend as well. Matt Grimes, obviously, going to Coventry from Swansea, which was big, Ollie, but Cabango stepping in place of the former Swansea captain. A valuable win at Bristol City, wasn't it?
What a massive win. Yeah, they really needed that because they looked like they were dropping like a stone. It really felt as though fans were starting to get a little bit concerned about what was happening at Swansea. They weren't able to take themselves forward. I think Luke Williams himself was putting himself under a little bit of pressure. I think he'd been saying a couple of things in interviews that maybe had started to look a little bit questionable, so they needed that win. And obviously, coming against Bristol City, not a massive derby, but there's a little bit of needle there, and so they'll massively enjoy getting that. Matt Grimes, huge loss. I really like him. I did think at one point there was a potential rumour that he might be heading northwards, shall we say, and I was a little bit excited about that because I think he's a fantastic player. He's always available, he's always fit, and so trying to replace that in that squad is really, really difficult. But Cabango showing his leadership qualities, just taking Swansea forward. I think hopefully he's got a massive role to play for that club, and hopefully they can keep him around for a long time as well, because he could be a huge player for them.
Yeah, it felt like a big one, didn't it, Gab, that one for Swansea?
I think so, and we'll come on to the relegation battle in the Championship, but I think the way that it's panning out, I think you might need more than 50 points to stay up. So that victory has taken Swansea City to 37 points, but they've still got another 14 plus to tick off in their remaining games. So a lot of work still to be done, but that does sort of nudge them a step closer, doesn't it?
100%. Bit of a banker at the weekend as well. I know it was for me anyway. Sunderland at home to Watford. I don't know what it is about Watford. Maybe it's the athleticism, just the undeniable quality in that squad. You just cannot write them off. And 2-2, obviously Sunderland maybe should have won it at the end, but that loser goal, Gab, I mean, wow. I mean, he's been so impactful, hasn't he, coming back into that Watford side? Yeah,
Imran Loser has. I think he had a great 22-23 campaign with the Hornets and just dropped off a little bit last year, but starting to kind of regather those sorts of levels. But the big one for me was Georgi Shakfatadze. I mean, I think he's clearly the best ball carrier in the Championship. I've really enjoyed him this season. He had a great Euros with Georgia and seems to be building on that. And I've also got to pay tribute to Tom Cleverley, because this is a horrible situation that he's been put in. Like, the only reason Watford didn't appoint another manager to replace Tom Cleverley was probably because of a visa issue. And that, as a head coach that's doing a really good job with a very limited and imbalanced squad, must be very disconcerting. But I think I saw Tom Cleverley's interview before the Sunderland game, and he spoke so well with so much clarity and so much a sort of tunnel vision determination to serve his football club, and I really admire that. So absolute shout out to Tom Cleverley, because I think he's handled himself with impeccably.
I think that's a fantastic point as well, because we talked about Paul Warne earlier, and I think Paul Warne, generally speaking, is one of those beloved managers in sort of the Championship from fans who aren't sort of fans of his club. And I think Tom Cleverley is going the same way, because he's just handled himself with class throughout what's been a horrible situation. At the start of the season, we were all talking, we got Watford really down in a relegation battle. Certain people had got them at the bottom of the league. There were conversations happening all the time about them really needing to look up and try to avoid being in League One. The fact that they're still in this conversation around the playoffs, there is so much credit on his shoulders. I think the way he set them up at Sunderland was perfect. They made sure that they were countering Sunderland beautifully. Once they'd gone ahead, shut down the game to really make Sunderland come and beat them. And I think that's something that Sunderland have found quite difficult at times this season. So I thought he'd done a fantastic job there setting them up. And I think, really coming across as a really good man, which is great to see when they're being successful.
Now, let's get on to one that I specifically wanted to touch on heavily. Portsmouth's pretty strong performance at Bramall Lane. Now, some would say, Gab, an absolute once again banker. You look at where Portsmouth are in the division. I think they've taken 7 points away from home all season. You look at Sheffield United at home, one of the strongest home records, and you're thinking, surely, very, very comfortable. Oli, before we get on to you, Gab, very, very surprising performance by Portsmouth. Extremely unlucky at the weekend not to take all 3 points, never mind the one.
Yeah, I was amazed. I'm always more surprised looking at the XG from the game, if you want for XG, that Portsmouth, I think, had almost double Sheffield United's, and that surprised me more than them getting a battling point or a smash and grab 1-0 win would have done. Like, they actually went to Bramall Lane and played one of the best teams in the Championship, created more chances than them, had some control in that game. I think that's enormously encouraging for John Mousinho's side to take into the last third of their campaign. They can perform away from home on top of his excellent form since November at Fratton Park. So special mention as well to Murphy on the wing, because Yeah, I mean, he caused so much problem with his sort of direct play down the left-hand side. And then what I really liked was that allowed Conor Ogilvie to really get in from left-back into those goal-scoring areas. Because Ogilvie isn't the sort of left-back that's going to really fly forward on the overlap and offer lots of quality deliveries. But they think they've got Murphy to sort of handle the wing and offer that skill and trickery. And then Ogilvie to try in and get in at the near post. And I thought that worked really well for Pompey.
Yeah, they were absolutely outstanding. I mean, in terms of games at Bramall Lane this season, the game before that, we'd lost 3-0 at home to Hull, and we kind of went, well, nobody's going to come and batter us, are they? That doesn't happen twice. It does. Portsmouth were absolutely outstanding. That was one of the best performances of any away team at Bramall Lane so far this season. The fact that they had double RXG, that United stat padded a little bit towards the end where Portsmouth had come on to us and we had 2 really big chances where we could have killed the game, but they were not reflective of how that game had been played. I think Murphy, obviously the outstanding player, probably the best individual performance we've seen at Bramall Lane this season, the way that he just completely dominated that left-hand side. It was Harry Clarke's first game at Bramall Lane and he just had a torrid time. He just could not handle the pace, the direct running, the quality on that ball. I mean, in the first half alone, set up the chance for the goal. He then also put 2 absolutely on a plate for open goals in the middle that they've knocked over the bar. If we'd have been 4-1 down at half-time, no Sheffield United fan would have been able to complain because Murphy had hit the bar, they'd already scored, they'd missed 2 open nets, Cooper had made a really good stop in the first sort of 5 minutes. We got absolutely pummeled and it feels a bit like daylight robbery to come here and go, 2-1 and we're up there in the automatic promotions, but that is just not the way that game played. But I think another shout out for Colby Bishop. I thought he was outstanding. The stats don't reflect it. If you look and you've not seen the game, you go, he's not won his duels, he's missed his chances. What a shocking game he must have had. He was outstanding. He's the reason I think that Murphy had so much joy, because what he did is he pinned back onto Robinson and Annell. He made sure that they weren't able to win the first balls. He made sure that they were always uncomfortable. So they never had a moment to settle. They never had a moment to just say, right, take the sting out of the game, let's play it. He was always straight on them. He was quick in the press. He was strong in the tackle. He made sure that they were able to get out and have somebody hold the ball centre forward. And that created the space for Murphy to run into. It meant he'd always got free air in front of him almost, so he could build up a head of steam before Clarke was able to stop him.
As opposed to the expensive air.
Obviously, the expensive air is the worst. That's what it felt like United were playing in.
Cost of living crisis.
To be honest, at Bramall Lane these days, with the business we've done in January, it's all expensive air at the moment. But yeah, I thought Portsmouth really, really impressed me. I think they should not be anywhere near relegation trouble come the end of the season if that's their performance level. Obviously, a lot of their away games, I think they've turned up. They've made numerous change. They've taken Lang out of the lineup. They've taken Murphy out of the lineup. And maybe that's why they've got such a poor away record, because if they can play like that, they beat most teams in the league, and they should have beat us. It does feel like daylight robbery, the fact that we got away with that, because they were outstanding.
Yeah, sometimes you need it in the Championship, but Mousinho's got them playing at home as well, really well as well, haven't they? So Portsmouth have given themselves a very, very good chance, I feel, as well. Let's round it off, chaps. We've got to give an honourable mention to Plymouth this weekend, knocking out Liverpool. Gab, take it away.
I think just the way Miran Muslic has just galvanised that club and the leadership qualities that he's brought. I think they've recruited superbly in defence. Katic looks like an absolute monster in the air, just doesn't lose a header. Massive fan of Adam Randall in midfield as well. The journey that he's made up on the leagues, he did brilliantly in the National League South with Torquay, and it's been kind of upwards for him. So yeah, really impressed with Plymouth Argyle at the weekend, and that's the kind of result that could possibly springboard a bid for safety in the Championship.
Yeah, they were just outstanding. I think a massive shout out for Conor Hazard as well. Some of those saves he made, particularly that one right in the last minute. That's a game winner. That's the one where you go, yes, he's won us this game of football, and it's a massively famous victory. I think it was a lovely performance, actually. I think it was one of those that I just did not expect to see coming out of them. I know Plymouth, their home record in the league's not been bad. They've been competitive. They've won some really difficult games there, but I just don't think anybody saw this one coming. I think a special shout out, Katic, fantastic game, even better post-match interviews. If anyone's not checked it out, some questionable language, but I found it particularly enjoyable. But yeah, I mean, they deserve all of the plaudits. I think this weekend it should all be about Plymouth, because it's just incredible to see a team struggling the way that they are go and take on best team in the country and beat them deservedly so.
Do you think this is, obviously this will pose the question now that relegation battle is getting harder and harder to call, but do you think it's the springboard I mean, you're just talking about the push for survival, but do you think it's the springboard they need, Gab, under Muslich now, a win like that? Because it's memorable, isn't it? It's a huge win.
It's a historic win for Plymouth Argyle. I come back to it, though. I think you're going to need more than 50 points to stay up. So if we look at where Plymouth Argyle are at the moment, they got 25 points from 30 games, so they've got 16 games left to play, and they've got to try and get 26 points from those or more. It's still going to be a big ask because you've got to try and catch the teams above them. So, but that's the kind of result that can give them the confidence to put a run together, and I think they've given themselves half a chance with the sort of turnaround in performances.
Let's move on then to part 2 of the podcast. I'm going to speak a little bit about Sheffield United in focus in particular. It would be remiss not to talk about Sheffield United without yourself here, Oli. An unusual period for United, playing maybe some would say that the simpler fixtures in the division in Hull, with the greatest respect, in Hull, Derby and Portsmouth. Since you were last on the podcast, it seems to have changed a little bit in terms of Sheffield United's authority in these games.
Yeah, we started the season really well, and actually it felt like we were taking these games and we were winning them comfortably. It really did feel as though we were turning up, particularly at Bramall Lane, where nobody was scoring goals against us. We got a rocket centre-half with Harry Souttar, and that really seemed to give us a platform where I just didn't see us losing. I couldn't see a way that other teams were going to break us down, because as soon as we scored a goal, and usually we have scored a goal in most games this season, it just felt like, well, we'll win 1-0 then. Even in a bad performance, you're not going to create anything against us. But the last few months, that has dropped. I think our performance level since maybe November now. It's been a long time since I can remember us really playing well, dominating. The best game we've had, maybe Norwich at Bramall Lane, but that was very much an aberration against a Norwich side that were plagued by injuries. So we really do need to try and find our feet. I think the biggest difference from where we were when I was last on to where we are today is that loss of Harry Souttar. I think I did some stats on this because we were looking at it on our channel to try and understand what's the difference, what's changed in United. When Harry Souttar played centre-half and he was playing either with Jack Robinson or with Anel, United conceded 0.3 goals per game. It was a goals conceded record that basically was level with Burnley's. We'd got a fantastic run. We'd not conceded, I think it was in 9 games at Bramall Lane. And that was the sort of platform where everything went forward. He got injured on Boxing Day, and when Anel and Robinson play together, we can see on average 1.2 goals per game. And that just tells you the difference in where United are at. It's no longer 1 goal to score a game. It's becoming 2, it's becoming 3. And that's a problem for us. I think as well, we've done loads of business in January. So we've gone out there, we recognise the gaps we had in our squad. We had a big injury crisis just going into January. You know, we'd lost Tom Davis, we'd lost Vinny Souza, we've lost Ollie Arblaster, we'd lost Tyrese Campbell, we've lost Kiefer Moore. We got a really bad run of injuries where we were really struggling. So we did that business to try and fill out the squad. But I think that's led us a bit disjointed as well. I think particularly the midfield seems to have lost what it had. I think, you know, I've talked about the defence there. We're not having that control. You're not confident the back door is shut. And so then you're saying, right, if you're not relying on your defence, your midfield needs to control the game. What you've got to do is you've got to be able to get the ball. You've got to have a ball winner. You need somebody who's going to progress the ball. You've got to find a way to take that pressure off yourselves by controlling the game through midfield. And what we've seen in those recent games, particularly Hull and Portsmouth at the weekend, is that we've had no progression through midfield. So when we've won the ball back, because we have got fantastic ball winners in Hamza Chowdhury, in Vinny Souza, we've had no way to progress the play. We've then just been stuck with short passing. We've been pressed to death. We've just had no way of getting out. So then we're playing long to Tom Cannon. That's not going to work. There's just no way that that's a structure that works in a football club. So we've got to find a way to get back to that sort of solid midfield pairing we had, because when it was Souza and Peck, they were really strong, and maybe that's the way to go. Personally, I'm looking at the recruitment. I'm seeing what we've done up front. You know, we've brought in Ben Brereton Diaz, fantastic footballer, did brilliant for us in the Premier League, got a goal against Derby, which was great to see. So I like him. I love that coming in.
Ollie, is moving Gus Harmer into midfield an option, a solution to this?
I think that's got to be the option. I think that's got to be the way we move forward, because for my money, I think Gus Harmer's the best central midfielder in the league, and he's played 31 games on the left wing. And I can't understand that at the moment. It's been successful, it's worked. It's meant that we've got him involved in the games where he's really directly affecting them. He's our top scorer with 7 goals this season. So clearly it is working and he is having an impact. But I think we can get so much more out of him. And I think actually we will pass the eye test better if he can drop into midfield. You pair him with Vinny Souza. You've got your ball winner, passes it onto your progressive passer or your progressive dribbler. He can get you out of trouble. You've then got players who are naturally going down the wings in Ben Brereton Diaz and probably Jezrak Saki on the right.
Yeah.
I think that gives you a really nice structure where United will have a repeatable pattern of play that will consistently create chances. Whereas at the moment, we're relying on moments of brilliance, and you can't do that consistently, even particularly against the best teams. We've not had a statement win yet. We've got Leeds coming up. There's no way that we can play Leeds and go, it's all right, Gus Harman will do something brilliant and we'll win 1-0, because that's just not how the game plays.
Yeah, and I think you move Gus Harmer in midfield, you get him more involved, so he might not have those individual moments of brilliance, or he might do, but you get him involved and you have him pinging those passes out. And the other option would be to build up in maybe a 3-1-4-2 shape, where in possession you have your right back tucking in, you have Harrison Burrows flying forward, you have Jezra Maksaki as your kind of right winger, and then in possession Ben Burton Diaz.
There we go.
If I could, I got there.
You get there in the end, Dan. Don't worry about it.
Cheers, Ollie. It took me a few seconds. They can be at the front too. So I think that's one that could work quite nicely and be a solution to United's creative.
Yeah, I just think one of the biggest risks around that, obviously, when you're looking at the change of shape, is we've not got enough centre-halves to play it. We've only got three at the club.
I don't mean play through at the back. I mean in possession, you tuck your right back. Because you tend to play... So Harry Clark, for instance, as a right back, or Alfie Gilchrist, they can also play centre-half. So I would say as a right back, you tuck them into an in possession back three, even if it's still four at the back.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've mentioned the players brought in, and we can talk about the January discussion in just a little bit, Ollie, in terms of just the synergy between the team now. Obviously, sometimes it can take a while to really gain those partnerships. But let's move on, chaps, to the automatic promotion discussion. We were talking about Sheffield United there. Obviously, we've spoken about Sunderland a little bit, Leeds, Burnley. Let's touch on, and things do change, or you do flip-flop potentially. So we've got our automatic promotion sides. Has anything changed for you guys? I'll go to you first, Ollie, in terms of your picks for the automatic this game week. What are your thoughts, mate? And are you going to back your beloved Sheffield United, which surely Ollie will do, to get automatic promotion?
Of course, surely I'm going to back my own team. Look, since the start of the season, I started the season, we did our 1-24s, and I backed Leeds and Burnley. They were the two that I picked. I thought Leeds are the outstanding team in the league for me. I think by a long way they seem to pass the eye test. I think if they can resolve some of the defensive issues, particularly around Meslier, because obviously he has cost them points that they should have won. Ultimately, you're looking at Hull, Portsmouth, you can probably list off 5 games where
Keep
you're
going.
thinking, can just go and go and go. But I think once you resolve that problem, I think is it 5 clean sheets in a row that he's kept now? So
well, 4 of them Meslier hardly had anything to do, but the last game was the 2-0 win at Coventry. Was there anything there, Connor, for you to kind of grab onto, or for him to grab onto?
Yeah, he made a world class save, Ilan Mele, and there was another very, very good one, but I was kind of looking, maybe I'm a bit critical, but I was looking at the second one, which he tipped onto the bar, and I thought I'd kind of be expecting an outstanding keeper at this level to make that save.
It's almost like because the bar has been lowered, you're almost trying to look for a bit of
that's why he managed to tip it onto it.
That is marvellous.
There you go, yeah. But the first one, how he got down to it, I don't know if you chaps have seen it, it was a wonderful save from Ellis Sims. So, yeah, I'm kind of with Ollie. I'll match him on that. I am going to go Leeds automatic promotion. A little bit of bias, but I do think Leeds, I think Ollie's bang on the money. We do pass the eye test and the stats don't always lie. Leeds are at the top of pretty much every attacking metric. Defensively, we're still pretty good as well. Gab, anything different from yourself?
My top 2 is Sunderland and Leeds. I think Sunderland are going to go to Elland Road and win next week. That's my prediction. That's my wild shout.
Clip it up, producer.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that once Sunderland get Romain Mundle and or Tommy Watson back fit, I think they're going to find another gear. They've still been able to tick off points even when they've been a little bit limited. They've had to play midfielders out wide. You move Enzo Lefebvre into midfield and you pair him with Joe Bellingham when he comes back, I think you've got a completely different proposition, Connor. So for me, I'm sticking with Sunderland to win the league, but I think Leeds also finish in the top 2.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you there. I think it's really important moving Lefebvre into that central attacking midfield spot. Mundle coming back. I genuinely didn't think there was much of a downturn from Jack Clark leaving to Mundle. I think Mundle really stepped up earlier on in the season. They've massively missed him.
And even Mundle to Tommy Watson.
Yeah.
Like Watson played well for a month or 2 when Mundle got injured as well. So
Tommy Watson was outstanding at Bramall Lane. That was probably the first game, Harry Suter played that one. He got sent off, but he did play some of it. But that was mainly because Watson had just given us such a ragged time that by the time we got to half time, we were all making mistakes defensively, and that ultimately creates the chance. For me, Sunderland, I really like them. I think there's so much to love about that club. And I think actually long term, they're set up probably better than, well, certainly better than I think United and Burnley in terms of long-term stability and being able to establish themselves as a Premier League team. So I think the youth, I think the way that they've set up their academy, the way they've been recruiting, they seem perfectly run and they seem like they're making sustainable improvements year on year to really take themselves forward. But I think this is a year too soon for them. I just don't think at the moment they've got the consistency to really be the team who are going to kick on, because they've got games like at the weekend, you know, where they've gone, Watford have come to the Stadium of Light, and, you know, I've just said United were rubbish, but we won. And I just don't see that from Sunderland. I don't see them playing rubbish and winning. And I think that's going to be the difference between coming third or fourth and coming second. You've got to be able to maximise your points. And I think actually the best team at doing that is going to be Burnley. They're my pick to go up with Leeds. I think Leeds win the league ultimately by about 10 points. I think then Burnley, they're solid, the way that they defend, the way that they're organised, the way that they can just shut down a game once they've scored a goal. Particularly with the recruitment. I love the recruitment of Marcus Edwards. I think he's going to be an outstanding player between now and the end of the season and could be the difference maker between them finishing above United.
Yeah, I guess the next point of conversation is to move on to the playoffs, which is always the most interesting bit of the Championship. So much to predict here.
Conor, before that, who do you think is going up with Leeds?
He tried to weasel away.
Thought I got away there. Yeah.
Cop out Conor will call you now.
I want the tag here. Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, after that, I agree with Gab. I think Sunderland are. You talked about the eye test. I think when you watch Sunderland, they are, when they're in flow, they're in full flow. They're an outstanding team to watch. They're very, very good. Sheffield United, you mentioned it earlier, and I agree with you. We were speaking about off air. Need that statement win. Obviously, Burnley coming up, Leeds coming up, Middlesbrough coming up, Sheffield Wednesday coming up. Huge games there of which they can provide that. But I think Leeds and Sunderland are the best teams in the division, and I think that consistency will be ironed out. The only concern I have with Sunderland is that defensive record. I'm not 100% sure I trust Luke O'Nien.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's an absolute mentality monster, and I think he's a really important part of their dressing room because I think he rubs off on some of these young talents. But is he maybe a top 2 quality centre out? Yeah. Was it rubbed off? No, I don't know that he's a top 2 quality centre half, so I can understand your point there.
Playoffs then?
Playoffs, Burnley, Sheffield United, West Brom and Norwich for me.
Oh.
I'm going to show my sheet because I've got United, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, and I've crossed out as strong as possible the word Sheffield Wednesday because I cannot bring myself to predict that United are going to play them in the first. Oh God, I'd be sick. So I've crossed it out and I've gone for Coventry. They've had a really good recent upturn. Their form looks really strong. Lampard does seem to have an impact. Now personally, I think he's probably benefiting from a little bit of variance around what was happening under Mark Robbins, and now it's falling their way. But I do think that they've had a really strong run. I'm looking at those points. I'm looking at how quickly they're coming up, and I think they are. Well, at the start of the season, I thought they were one of the best teams in the league. They're now starting to show that in their form, and I'm hoping to God that it's them and not Wednesday that finish 6th.
Coventry over West Brom, though, who have been there all season, or over Norwich, who have been easily a top 6 side when Josh Sargent's fit?
Yeah, I really like Norwich and I really like Josh Sargent. I think he will have a massive impact in terms of the way that they're going to go forwards and trying to get them into the playoffs. I think ultimately it's a really difficult decision. Yeah. For me, a lot of it does come down to, you know, when we've played these teams, Coventry were outstanding. I thought they did a real job on us when we've played them, whereas Norwich, for me, they were just lacking a little bit. I think as well, I go back to the start of the season and I look at the way I evaluated these squads and the way that I was putting them together. And I felt that Norwich were in a bit of a transition year. Sure. Felt that they got work to do. They were still developing. This wasn't their year to really go and run at it. And so I think ultimately, as we get to the end of the season, they'll be looking at this and thinking, maybe it is an opportunity missed, but it's set them up perfectly to go again next season. Whereas Coventry feel a lot more ready to go and do it now.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm still going with Sheffield United in there. I'm going with Burnley. I'm going with West Brom, and I'm going with Middlesbrough.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that. I think Middlesbrough, they're just so wildly, like, at their best, I think they're on a par with any of the top 4, or maybe excluding Leeds, because Leeds have been great. But Yeah, whereas I think that their floor is very low, and that's the problem with Middlesbrough. Can you rely on them? But I also think the bar for the playoffs generally is quite low. Yeah. So I think there's going to be a lot of points outside the top four. I think there's going to be a lot of points that are kind of be spread out quite evenly, and maybe Middlesbrough, because of their high ceiling, they can kind of get away with maybe having a low floor.
Back to you. Relegation 3.
Relegation 3. I've gone with Luton Town, Cardiff City, and Plymouth Argyle, but I'm not confident in a single one of my predictions.
No, I've been saying this all day since we came together. I've been like, I have no idea who's getting relegated. This is genuinely, I think, for me, the worst area of the league to try and predict, because I feel as though I've got a really strong feeling on automatics. I believe in Leeds. I believe in Burnley, really, in terms of getting over the line. Like I say, I'm quite confident in terms of the playoffs, who is going to be the ones who make that jump. Whereas relegation, I genuinely think it could be anybody. Today, I've landed on Plymouth, because I just think they've got too much work to do in terms of catching up. But I do think they'll have a pretty positive run to the end of the season. I just don't think it'll be enough. Ultimately, I'm going for Cardiff. So I think the new manager change at Derby will make a huge difference. I think if they are able to get John Eustace, that's massive. And so I think that'll be a real impetus for them to kick on, make sure they're not in the trouble.
I would have definitely gone with Derby if it wasn't for the managerial change and the likelihood of them getting Eustace.
Agreed. And then I've gone controversially, very controversially, I've gone for Stoke in the final relegation spot. I'm looking at the league and I'm looking at the teams that are in and around there, and I'm thinking, well, Hull have just come and battered us 3-0 at Bramall Lane, so there's no way I'm picking them to go down. Portsmouth have just played us off the park at Bramall Lane. Derby have just done a new manager change. So suddenly I'm looking at Stoke and I'm looking at Luton as the two teams who are in my debate for that final spot. And it's naivete, it's arrogance, it's probably absolute nonsense, but I just can't see Luton going down at the minute. A double dip, I think, is so unlikely. I don't know why I can't buy into it, but for me, between Stoke and Luton, it was Stoke that I took a gamble on.
But that's what the Championship relegation battle is making us do. It's making us doubt Mark Robbins.
Yeah,
like that's how mad it is.
100%. And I'm looking at that whole sort of bottom piece there, and Cardiff I just can't see going. I can't see going. A little bit of a recent upturn in form. I'm still going with Plymouth. I agree with you, Gab and Ollie. I think they've got too much to do there, even with
just the maths, isn't it? As much as you want to believe in Muslich, it's just too much of a I
agree with you in terms of Luton. I've kind of just checked. I mean, look, the form is abhorrent. It's very, very bad. I thought Bloomfield may have had a little bit more of an impact there so far. I think they'll go, and I'm gonna throw Hull City in there as well. I just think the teams in and around them, I agree with Gab. I think Derby are going to get that boost if Eustace goes. Portsmouth, they're too strong, I feel, to go there.
But you know what, Connor? What's brilliant about this from a neutral point of view is it wouldn't surprise me if any of the 9 went down.
No. From Preston.
I almost want, maybe from Preston, but I almost want to make a case for any of them to stay up, because I do. But that's just how crazy it is. So really exciting from a neutral point of view.
Let's bat that back then. Midweek fixtures, some big ones coming up. Watford versus Leeds, Sheffield United versus Middlesbrough, West Brom versus Blackburn. Probably the pick of the bunch, fellas. We'll move to Ol first for this. Watford, Leeds. That looks tasty all of a sudden with Watford's draw at Sunderland, doesn't it, Ollie? And Leeds draw down there last season, but they were battered by Watford. Emmanuel Dennis show. I think this is going to be maybe trickier than a lot of Leeds fans think.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is one of those games that really does look like a banana skin. I think they've had their difficulties at home recently. They had a fantastic run, basically up until United played them at the end of December. I think they were still unbeaten at home. I think they got maybe the joint second best record in the league behind Leeds up until that point. Since then, I think it's been 2 or 3 defeats that they've picked up. So they have started to struggle a little bit at Vicarage Road, but I think that's a horrible game to play. I think the only thing that makes me lean towards it potentially being a comfortable win is that obviously Leeds rested 10 players at the weekend. You know, they've been able to take a little bit of a break, take stock of where they're at, whereas Watford had that really difficult, hard-fought battle at Sunderland that maybe they're going to have to try and recover from. It's a long journey back home that you've got to bear in mind for them, coming back from the Stadium of Light. So, yeah, I think this is a tricky one. I think it's a potential banana skin, but I expect Leeds to navigate it.
Yeah, Gab, just moving on to this Watford team right now. Do you think they'll be galvanised after what happened at the weekend against Sunderland?
I think it's the kind of performance and possibly results that can galvanise them. Definitely big positives to take from them in terms of the performance of Sheffield United. I think that's a big plus. I love the way that Tom Cleverley has galvanised them. I was a little bit surprised to kind of move it on to an odds angle that in terms of the double chance, Watford or draw is 13-8, which considering Leeds have only won 6 of their 15 away games,
a bit of that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good value just to touch on the gambling aspect. But I think Watford will hope they can use that as a springboard to build on that performance.
100%. Feels like it's definitely going to be a midfield battle in there. Sheffield United Middlesbrough, huge game, massive game. Borough, this could be a bit of a statement win. It feels like it's going to be extremely tight between the two. Borough, not the greatest defensively. Sheffield United at the minute, a little bit at odds, really. Ollie, how do you see this one going, mate?
It's really difficult one to predict because obviously we played Borough earlier in the season, and actually when we went to the Riverside, I thought that we were playing Borough as equals. You know, at the start of the season, Borough were one of the teams who I thought were most likely to disrupt the top two. I thought they'd be right up there in that debate with Leeds and with Burnley. I think their ceiling is up there with the best in the league, as we said before. I think they've got a really strong team in there. But for whatever reason, it's just not happening for them at the moment. They've been in some terrible form since about Boxing Day, when they absolutely crumbled against Wednesday. And since then, they've just never been able to really recover the form to get themselves going again. But this is a big game under the lights at Bramall Lane. And I think last time we got promoted, they came and battered us at Bramall Lane. And if I'm being honest, I think there's half a chance they could do that again. I think their dynamism through midfield will be massive for this game. I think if United don't change it up, if we see Chowdhury and Sousa again, I would expect Hackney to have a bit of a field day, sort of running that midfield, picking up all the second balls, making sure that they're always the aggressor in the game. I'm a little bit worried about how they're going to come at us down the wings. I think without Latte Lath, I'm a little bit less concerned about how clinical they're going to be in front of goal. I think there's a chance, if it's Conway, for example, I think there's a chance that he needs 2 or 3 chances to put one in the back of the net. So maybe we'll ride our luck again like it's Portsmouth. But if United turn up and put in the same level of performance that we have done in our last 2 home games, there's no way we win this. We've got to be better. We've got to make changes. We've got to find a structure that suits these new players and gets the most out of them. Because if we just stick to what we've been doing in recent weeks, I know we're on a great run of form. I think we've won 5 in 6, but the performances do not back that up. And eventually you get caught out. I thought Hull would be the lesson learned. It hasn't been. We've continued to be stodgy. We've continued to struggle. And so I'm really worried about this one midweek. On our channel, I'm going to be predicting that we lose this one because I do think that Borough have got a point to prove, and I think United are just in a difficult patch at the minute. So unless we make big changes, I expect Borough to come, and I think my prediction would probably be 3-1 because I just think that if they're cutting through us the way that other teams have cut through us with their increased sort of attacking efficiency, I don't see how we keep them out.
And a big incentive as well, Gab, for Borough, isn't it, up against Sheffield United with West Bromwich Albion playing Blackburn Rovers?
Yeah, so they're not both going to win. Cutting edge insight here on the Sportsman Untitled.
Cheers, Gab. Good work.
I'm here for you, mate. I think I'm really excited to see what Middlesbrough can do. They obviously got Sheffield United's number because they did win a crucial game at Bramall Lane in the second half of the 2023 campaign. So Michael Carrick's side have got that positive memory, I suppose. But yeah, they've just got so many really creative attacking players. Finn Azaz I've been a massive fan of in the Championship this season. So he'll certainly be one for Sheffield United to keep quiet.
Yes, touch on Sheffield United's transfer window really quickly because we've got you here, Ollie. An interesting one, wasn't it? Obviously, there was rumoured targets, Harry Darling, Jimmy Dunn. Obviously, you ended up on Rob Holding. There was obviously Ben Brereton Diaz brought in. I know Tom Cannon's been controversial, a £10 million signing, of which I know it seems to be a 50-50 split. Harry Clark coming in as well. And Hamza Chowdhury, I thought was excellent against Derby County.
Yes, he was.
How do you see it at the minute, that January transfer window?
Yeah, we tried to do an evaluation of this because I think going into the window, there were difficulties within our squad. We knew we'd not got the players. We knew that we needed to do a lot of work. I think centre forward in particular, for a few games through January, Ryan Brewster were playing, and that's not ideal, shall we say, when you're looking to try and get automatic promotion from the Championship. He's not the player you want to be relying on. So I'm glad that we've gone out and done that business. I think it's a real statement of intent from new owners. They wanted to have a little bit of a statement signing, come and show what they are all about, what they want to do. Tom Cannon's struggled in his early games at United. Obviously, you don't write somebody off after 3 games. There's a lot of potential there. He's a young player who's going to really develop into a fantastic striker for United. But for the here and now, I'm not sure of his place in the team because it doesn't seem as though he's playing the same role the way that Campbell's played it, the way that Kiefer Moore plays it. He's a little bit at odds and he's struggling to get involved in the game. So I think certainly for the here and now, that one's not quite paying off. But there's every chance, we say that and then Wednesday night we go and play Borough and he gets 2. So hopefully that's what we're hoping for, something to kickstart his time with us. Brereton Diaz we've wanted since the summer. I think if we'd stayed up last season, we would have spent any money to keep Ben Brereton Diaz. We felt like he had to go to the Premier League. It's not worked out for him, so we're really lucky to have him back at the club. I love Chowdhury. I like Clark. He had an absolute nightmare on Saturday, but I do like him. I think he'll be good. But ultimately, I don't think we answered the question that we came into the window with. I think we came into that transfer window with one very big gaping gap in our team, and it was the replacement of Harry Souttar, a 6'7", dominant monster who will physically sort of control any game. A big striker like Colby Bishop comes to Bramall Lane and he says, right, I'm going to physically dominate you. Harry Souttar laughs in your face and pushes you on the floor because he's just that kind of player who means that they're not going to be able to get the ball up front and hold it.
I mean, he wouldn't have been laughing in his face because it'd been...
He'd been laughing miles above him.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem for me, is that we brought in Rob Holding in the end. We did a little bit of sort of throwing darts at a dartboard. It seemed like on sort of deadline day, there were players rumoured, like you say, Darling, like Tanganga was talked about for a long time. And he would have been fantastic. I think, I said at the time, I think a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I said, signing Tanganga is the difference between finishing 3rd and 2nd. Signing, ultimately, I all respect to him, but signing Holding, it's the difference between finishing 3rd and 5th. Like, it's that kind of thing where I just think as though we've not answered the key question. And so we went into that game against Portsmouth and everything that we were worried about was suddenly there, front and centre. They've got a big, strong centre forward. He's pinned you in and you can't do anything to try and combat that. So I think it was a good window in terms of setting us up for the future. I think it was a good window in terms of a statement of intent. I think we signed some really good players, but I don't think we answered the key question that was, can you replace Harry Souttar? And right now, the answer to that is no, unless Rob Holding turns out to be a foot taller than I thought he was.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And Gab, just your quick thoughts on the I guess the top fours window, because it feels crucial right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I quite like that Leeds knew when not to sign players as well as when to sign players, because I think that sometimes you can, if you go too big in January, you can actually disrupt the cohesion. I think Sheffield United needed to sign six players. I don't think Leeds, they might have needed a goalkeeper. That's a different conversation. But I don't think, even the centre-forward conversation, they scored 7 goals past Cardiff, so they are able to sort of spread the goals out. So I quite liked in a way that Leeds were able to say, you know what, if the deal's not right, we're going to sit back and trust what we've got.
I think on that as well, because we've spoken to a few Leeds fans and I've sort of been part of that conversation, and it feels like there is a real, we've not done any business, everybody else has been proactive, that's going to cost us, why have we not done any business? But actually, when you sit back and you objectively look at these transfers, and maybe the questions for you, Conor, is which of those players gets in Leeds' team? Of all the signings that have been made by United, by Burnley, by Sunderland, which of those players actually starts a game for Leeds this season? I don't think the answer, maybe you might pick Enzo Lefebvre, but where? Where does he get in the team? And so I don't see that Leeds will be sat there and should be worried about the sort of squad strength when none of these players really get into their team.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ollie. I think as well, you look at I think it's quite sensible from the owners as well, because there's a lot of obligations in loans, nowadays, especially when it's difficult to get hold of certain personnel. I think if the 49ers, Leeds owners, are looking at the Premier League, I think the rumoured Cameron Archer, Adam Armstrong, you kind of look at those, and if they've got an obligation in there, which potentially they have, you do look at that and think, long-term view, are those players going to be an asset to you in the Premier League?
You want the loans with the option to buy if you're going to go for anyone, as opposed to the obligation to buy, because then you...
100%.
You've got wiggle room.
100%. And yeah, I feel like, I know there's a lot of Leeds fans who are not maybe a fan of Matteo Joseph. I think as a second striker to Joel Peru, it's sort of more than enough. And Leeds are lucky enough to have Dan James, Mano Solomon, Ramazani, Nonso, etc., just in behind, chipping in. So, and I guess that's a perfect time to move on to Gab's Championship treble, I guess, for this week. Gab, do you want to relay what that is?
My Championship treble is, if I can just get it out here. Very professional as always. I'm going to go with my championship treble is Norwich to win at Hull, because they got Josh Sargent, so I'm happy to trust them. Pretty simple. Sheffield United, I think, will win at Luton, and Sheffield Wednesday, I think, will beat Coventry. There you go. Yeah.
So this is a treble for the weekend, isn't it? Just to make sure.
Yeah,
because I think we've just previewed the midweek games.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's the one.
That's for the weekend, next weekend. Be a big win as well for Norwich at Hull. Huge win. And your corner of concern. Well, I'll let you go on what it is.
My corner of concern is Blackburn, because the likelihood of losing John Eustace to Derby. He was asked about it before and after their FA Cup defeat to Wolves, and his responses suggest that there's a pretty strong interest in going to Derby. And I think on paper it probably surprises people, because he's obviously managing a team that's 5th in the Championship at the moment, going to a team that's 22nd. On paper it does look like an odd one. However, I think there's probably a personal side to this, where his family are in the Midlands. He was born in Solihull. It probably suits him to move close to home, and also maybe there's a feeling that in somebody like David Klaus as an owner, he'd rather work for somebody like him than maybe work for the Venkies. Maybe there's an aspect of that in there as well.
Yeah, I think it's massively concerning, isn't it, for Blackburn when you think about it? You know, their form's not there anyway at the moment. I think they've lost 5 in 6. So
4 in 5.
Is it 4 in 5? And so they're trying to work through to make sure that they're trying to find the pace again to get back into that playoff conversation to really push themselves forward. But I think it's a massive statement against the Venkies if you're 6th in the league pushing for the playoffs and you're willing to drop down to a team that's in so much relegation trouble. And I think long term, there's obviously a massive problem there. And I don't know how Blackburn try to arrest this slide, because the start of the season, they're another team who we feel were potentially going to be in that relegation conversation. They've overperformed with an outstanding manager, but what happens to them when he steps away? It's just more destabilisation, more issues running through the club, and long term I'm really worried for them, and I feel for them a little bit, because obviously you don't want to see a team struggling in that way because of off-field impact.
Yeah, I can't get my head around it. If you're 6th in the division and you've got the chance of playoffs with 14, 15 games left, promotion, I should say, not just the playoffs. I know there's a personal connection. I know he used to play for Derby as well. Yeah. I find that crazy.
It's odd on paper, but also let's think about this in terms of the people that you're working with, Conor, because if the owners, the people who are responsible for your job, are people that you don't really have much communication with, that puts you in a very difficult position as a manager, because you sort of don't know what the state of play is. Whereas if I'm not saying David Close is perfect by any means as Derby owner, but I do think he seems like somebody who A, genuinely cares about the club, and B, is somebody who's got a bit of an open door policy, as opposed to you don't know where they are. And I think that human relationship, for somebody like John Eustace, he seems very honest and down to earth. I think he'd want to work with honest and down to earth people as well.
I think he'll have learned from his Birmingham experience as well, obviously there, where he felt as though he was undercut. He'll know that football management is a very tricky game. You know that it's just a bad run and all of a sudden you're out on your ear. And it sounds as though there's the opportunity potentially for a pay rise. He's back home with his family. And I think those things are going to be absolutely massive to somebody who understands how volatile it is. But as well, there seems to be some rumours that Derby might be receiving a little bit of sort of additional funding. It sounds as though they might have got somebody coming in terms of ownership situation who's going to be supporting the club, and so again that also might be playing on his mind, and he might think that long term there's a big future there.
Yeah, because it's a huge club, isn't it, Derby County as well, so if they can stabilise things off the field, then they've got enormous potential, I think.
The interesting thing will be Blackburn's next move if it does happen. Right, fellas, we're going to end it with a very engaging question, okay? It's a wordy question. So, Gab, I'm going to come to you first. It's in relation to the playoffs. So, you're stranded on a desert island and your fate rests on a team finishing 6th in the league, winning the playoffs and gaining promotion. As it stands, Blackburn Rovers are 6th with West Bromwich Albion 2 points above in 5th. He's staying track here, all. There are only 5 points separating Blackburn from Millwall down to 14th. Who are you backing not only to finish in 6th place, but also to be most likely to win the playoffs and gain promotion to the Premier League?
It's Norwich City. And the reason I'm so bullish about Norwich City, Conor, is because I think when Josh Sargent starts, they're clearly a top 6 side because of how he makes the rest of the squad around them better. But also, the other point I'd make is they did have an issue at left back, since the issues at centre half has meant that Callum Doyle has had to play in central defence, and they've not had a left back who can do what Callum Doyle does in terms of his flexibility and sort of in-game awareness that Johannes Hofthorpe likes. But Lucien Mahova, who came through the academy, has actually done a pretty similar job to Callum Doyle. He came off the bench at Bramall Lane, as Oli would have seen, and actually had a decent appearance. So I'm actually feeling pretty good about Norwich, especially with the quality and creativity of Marcelino Nunes in midfield. So for me, I'm very confident that Norwich City are a top 6 side, and I'd be backing them.
And a bit of consistency as well for Borja Sainz, who I still believe, Gab, is the top scorer.
He's mad.
In the Championship.
Well, do you know what, Conor? I think this shows there's a dearth of real clinical centre-forwards. Like, you go back 5 or 10 years, there used to be a long list of centre-forwards in the Championship, like Jordan Rhodes, Britt Sombolonga, maybe even Ross McCormack, who you had at Leeds. Players who were really potent. I don't think you're really seeing centre forwards in the Championship be as prolific nowadays as maybe we used to see.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right, though. I think Marcelino Nunes being back and in full swing. I think Borja Sainz, what a player at this level. I mean, will he be at Norwich if they remain in the Championship next season? I'm not sure he will. And I think you're right. There's an argument right now. Josh Sargent, all round, is potentially the best striker in the division.
I think of the teams that are going to be in that conversation, I think Middlesbrough are probably the most likely to win the playoffs. I think they're the team who have the highest ceiling. We've talked about it before. I think if they can reach their top performance level, there's not many teams that are going to be in this discussion, in this conversation, that can live with them. And so for me, I think that is going to drive me. And whether or not they can reach that consistently, I think the question is, can they finish 6th? If they can finish 6th, then I think they've got as good a chance as anybody of winning the playoffs. Because over 3 games, they can be as good as anybody in this division. The problem is, can they have the consistency over the next 16 to make sure that they're able to get into that 3-team shoot-off? But yeah, if I was picking a team who I'm confident will make the playoffs, but who I also then think have got a fantastic chance of winning them, Middlesbrough are the team for me.
Not sitting on the fence, but I'd agree. Yeah, 100% Middlesbrough. I think the Morris facilitation through that middle right now of Hayden Hackney is unbelievable. Through the middle, Middlesbrough destroy teams, and my only concern, we've mentioned this with a few teams now, is at the back. But that midfield, I think, is where you win games. And if they can get Hayden Hackney to that next level, impressed with the signings of Kelechi Iheanacho, Mark Travers in goal, Ryan Giles as well. I think they've made some really good additions in January. So we'll wait and see on Middlesbrough, but I'm pretty confident in Borough to do it. Right, well, let us know what you think, of course, with our engaging conversation there and question at the end in the comment section below. Sportsman fans, thank you so much for joining us on this appearance of The Sportsman Untitled this week. Thank you, Gab, for joining us, and thank you, Oli, as well. And we will see you next Monday, or I may not. Simon may be back on next week's edition of the show. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in a bit. Cheers.